Every time someone disrespects you, you are making a decision, whether you realize it or not. It can happen in the middle of an ordinary conversation, when a careless remark suddenly lands harder than expected, or in front of other people, when someone dismisses you as though your words carry no weight. For a few seconds, everything tightens. Your attention narrows. A response forms before they have even finished speaking. Then the conversation moves on, but your mind does not. Hours later, you are still replaying the moment, thinking about what you should have said, what they meant, and why you allowed yourself to be spoken to that way. The insult lasted seconds. Your reaction can occupy the rest of the day. That is what makes disrespect more complicated than the words themselves. The other person may have been careless, arrogant, deliberately cruel, or completely unjustified. But the first emotion that rises inside you does not automatically tell you what the situation requires. Anger can reveal that something matters. It can signal that a boundary has been crossed. But anger is a poor decision maker when it is given complete control. Stoic philosophy draws a careful distinction here. You cannot command another person's behavior, but you can examine the judgment you form in response to it. That does not mean accepting mistreatment or pretending nothing happened. It means refusing to hand someone else control over your state of mind, simply because they chose to behave badly. A quieter question begins to matter more than how to make them regret disrespecting you. What response will allow you to remain in command of yourself? Sometimes that means saying nothing until the emotion settles. Sometimes it means asking calmly what they meant, bringing the conversation back to the actual issue, or stepping away before anger turns a difficult moment into something worse. The answer depends on the situation. What matters is that the response is chosen rather than triggered. Someone else may control the first few seconds of the encounter, but they do not have to control what those seconds turn you into. Once that distinction becomes clear, disrespect stops being only an injury to endure. It becomes a test of judgment, revealing whether you can protect your dignity without surrendering your self-command. When someone says something that cuts a little deeper than expected, the body often reacts before the mind has finished understanding what happened. Your shoulders tighten, your attention narrows. A reply begins forming almost instantly. That speed can feel powerful because it gives you the impression that you are standing up for yourself. But speed and strength are not the same thing. Sometimes the fastest response is simply the oldest habit speaking through you. The difficult part is that disrespect rarely arrives as a clean, objective event. It comes wrapped in interpretation. Someone interrupts you, and the mind says they do not value what I have to say. Someone laughs at your mistake, and the mind says they are trying to make me look stupid. Someone speaks to you with a dismissive tone, and suddenly the conclusion becomes much larger than the original moment. They think I am weak. They want to embarrass me. I need to show them that they cannot treat me this way. Within seconds, a single behavior has become a story about your worth, their intentions, and what you must do next. This is where Stoic discipline becomes practical rather than theoretical. The first task is not to decide whether the other person was wrong. They may have been completely wrong. The first task is to separate what happened from what your mind immediately decided about what happened. You can notice the anger without turning it into a command. You can feel the urge to defend yourself without assuming that you must obey it. You can recognize that your pride has been touched without allowing pride to choose your next sentence. Emotion is information, but information is not instruction. Anger may tell you that something matters. It does not automatically tell you what deserves to happen next. That pause can be surprisingly uncomfortable. When someone disrespects you, silence may feel like surrender, especially when other people are watching. You might worry that if you do not answer immediately, everyone will assume you were weak or that the other person won. But notice what that fear is asking you to do. It is asking you to prove your strength on someone else's timetable. It is asking another person's behavior to determine when you speak, how quickly you speak, and how intensely you respond. The pause breaks that pattern. You are no longer reacting simply because the situation demanded a reaction. You are giving yourself enough space to decide whether a response is actually useful. As Epictetus put it, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That space between what happens and what you do next is where your judgment becomes stronger than your impulse. Picture a disrespectful comment being made in front of several people. The room becomes slightly uncomfortable, and you feel that familiar pressure to say something clever, sharp, or forceful. Instead, you breathe, keep your expression composed, and let a few seconds pass. That can change the entire atmosphere. The other person may realize that their comment landed badly. Any of those outcomes is possible, and none of them needs to determine your sense of control. There is also something psychologically important about remaining physically composed. Your body often communicates your state before your words do. Looking away repeatedly, laughing nervously, fidgeting, rushing to explain yourself, or speaking much faster than usual can reveal how strongly the moment has affected you. You do not need to perform confidence, but you can practice steadiness. Keep your posture natural, breathe normally, let your face remain relaxed, listen carefully. These small actions give your mind a chance to catch up with your emotions. The point is to stop broadcasting panic when you do not need to feel panicked. And this is where the idea of psychological presence becomes important. Presence means remaining with what is actually happening instead of escaping into the story your mind creates around it. You hear the words, you notice the tone, you observe your own reaction, then you decide what matters. Maybe the person made an innocent mistake, maybe they were genuinely disrespectful, maybe a boundary needs to be stated clearly, maybe the best response is to continue the conversation without giving the comment additional weight. The pause does not tell you which answer to choose. It gives you the mental position from which you can choose it. That distinction protects you from two opposite mistakes. One is becoming aggressive because you believe respect must always be defended immediately. The other is becoming passive because you believe being calm means tolerating everything. Neither is necessary. A calm person can still be firm. A disciplined person can still say that something is unacceptable. The difference is that the response comes from judgment rather than emotional pressure. You are not trying to prove that you are powerful. You are deciding what behavior you will participate in and what behavior you will not. This is strength because you are choosing your behavior while the situation tries to choose it for you. With practice, this begins to change the way disrespect feels. The comment may still sting. You may still feel anger. You may still notice the desire to respond sharply. But there is now a small space between the feeling and the action. That space is where self-command develops. Each time you use it, you become a little less predictable to your impulses and a little more deliberate with your behavior. Eventually, someone else's attempt to provoke you no longer determines the speed of your heartbeat, the words leaving your mouth, or the kind of person you become in that moment. You still see the disrespect clearly. You simply refuse to let it make your decisions for you. Once you have created that small space between the insult and your reaction, something else becomes possible. You can listen to what was actually said instead of immediately preparing your defense. Disrespect often survives inside ambiguity. A person says something insulting, then hides behind a joke. They make an accusation, then claim they were only asking. They question your character, then act surprised when you take their words seriously. You can spend your energy proving what they meant while they avoid responsibility. A calmer approach is to make the words visible. If someone implies that you cannot be trusted, you can ask them to explain exactly what they mean. If they suggest that you are incapable, you can ask which specific action led them to that conclusion. If they make a degrading comment and then laugh it off as humor, you can calmly ask whether they intended the comment the way it sounded. You are simply refusing to let vague language carry the entire conversation. When people are forced to become precise, emotional statements often lose some of their power. This is where mirroring becomes useful. You reflect the meaning of what was said back to the person in a calm and neutral way. A person may say that you are always unreliable because you were late once. Instead of launching into a long explanation, you can ask whether they are saying that one mistake means you cannot be trusted. The goal is not to win a verbal contest. The goal is to remove exaggeration and bring the conversation closer to what is actually true. That difference in intention matters more than people realize. The same sentence can either calm a conflict or ignite it depending on the tone behind it. A sarcastic voice turns reflection into mockery. A raised eyebrow can make a reasonable question sound like an accusation. A cold expression can communicate contempt, even when the words seem neutral. If you want clarity, your delivery has to match your purpose. Speak slowly enough that the other person can hear the question. Keep your expression composed. Do not pile on extra comments after you have asked. Let the question stand on its own. Then something interesting can happen. The other person may correct themselves. They may explain that they did not mean what you thought they meant. They may become defensive. They may realize that their statement sounds unreasonable when repeated clearly. You cannot control which reaction appears, and that is precisely why your attention should remain on your own conduct. The point is not to force an apology when emotions rise. The point is to stop participating in confusion. If they clarify themselves honestly, you have something real to work with. If they become more aggressive, you have learned something else about the situation. This way of responding has a quiet psychological effect because it removes the reward of emotional escalation. A person who expects anger may know how to fight with anger. They can answer your accusation with another accusation, raise their voice, interrupt you, or turn the conversation into a contest. Calm clarity gives them less material to fight against. You are not handing them a dramatic reaction that can become the next subject of the argument. You are keeping the focus on what was said and what it means. Sometimes a person is clearly provoking you, and asking for clarification would only give them more opportunities to continue. Discernment matters. Stoic discipline is not a rule that says you must respond to everything with the same technique. It is the ability to choose the response that fits the situation. Sometimes the best response is a question. Sometimes it is a direct statement. Sometimes it is silence. The important change is that you are selecting rather than reacting. There is also a deeper lesson here about defending your character. When someone questions your intentions, your first instinct may be to explain yourself in detail. You begin listing evidence, recalling every relevant event, and trying to make the other person finally understand that you are not the person they described. But endless self-defense can accidentally give their judgment more importance than it deserves. This is where Stoic judgment becomes especially useful. Your character is built through your actions over time, not through your ability to win every argument about yourself. If someone misunderstands you, you can correct the misunderstanding. If someone deliberately misrepresents you, you can establish a boundary. But you do not need to chase every distorted opinion until it becomes favorable. The more comfortable you become with that distinction, the less threatening disrespect starts to feel. You can hear an accusation without immediately defending your entire life. You can ask for clarity without becoming hostile. You can allow another person to explain themselves without abandoning your own judgment. And when their words are placed clearly in front of both of you, you can decide what comes next. Sometimes the conversation ends with understanding. Sometimes it reveals a deeper problem. Either way, you have gained something important. You stayed present long enough to see the situation as it was, instead of becoming trapped inside the emotional version of it. That is the real value of reflecting someone's words back to them. It is not a trick for making people feel embarrassed. It is a discipline for keeping reality in the room. Words matter, meaning matters, and neither anger nor humor can automatically erase their consequences. When you can hold that standard calmly, your composure becomes more than self-protection. It becomes a way of guiding the conversation toward honesty. And once the conversation becomes honest, you can finally decide whether there is something worth repairing, something worth confronting, or something you are better off leaving behind. If this way of thinking has given you something to reflect on, and you want more conversations about Stoic discipline, self-command, and living with greater clarity, consider subscribing. It is simply a way to continue returning to these ideas and putting them into practice. One thought and one decision at a time. Disrespect can become contagious. Someone speaks with hostility, and before you realize it, your own voice becomes sharper. They interrupt, so you interrupt. They become sarcastic, so sarcasm suddenly feels justified. Their frustration enters the room, and somehow you begin carrying it as if it were your own. This is one of the easiest ways to lose control without noticing it. The other person may have started the conflict, but once you adopt their emotional rhythm, you have joined it. That is why redirection matters. Instead of allowing their behavior to determine the direction of the conversation, you can bring the interaction back to what actually deserves attention. Think about a disagreement at work, where someone stops discussing the actual problem and begins criticizing another person's intelligence. The conversation was supposed to be about a decision, a deadline, or a mistake, but suddenly the subject has changed. If you answer the insult with another insult, the original issue disappears. Now everyone is watching two people fight for control of the room. A more disciplined response can be much simpler. You can acknowledge the comment without feeding it and return attention to the matter that brought everyone together. You have not pretended the disrespect was acceptable. You have refused to make it the main event. That distinction matters because attention is a form of influence. Whatever receives your attention begins to shape your emotional state and your behavior. If you spend 10 minutes arguing about an insult, the insult has already taken 10 minutes of your life and changed the purpose of the conversation. Redirection interrupts that process. It brings your attention back to something concrete. What needs to be solved? What boundary needs to be stated? What action would actually improve the situation? These questions are quieter than anger, but they are usually far more useful. This is close to the Stoic practice of separating the event from the judgment surrounding it. A person can behave badly without forcing you to behave badly in return. Their anger is theirs. Their impatience is theirs. Their need to provoke may be theirs. You can recognize all of it without adopting any of it. That does not mean pretending you are unaffected. You may feel your pulse rise or the urge to answer sharply. You may even think of the perfect response that would embarrass them. The disciplined choice is to notice those impulses without giving them authority. You can let the feeling exist while choosing a different direction. There is also something powerful about refusing to reward provocation. Some disrespect is designed, consciously or unconsciously, to pull a reaction out of you. Once you react emotionally, your anger becomes another subject of the argument. Your raised voice becomes evidence against you. Your defensive explanation becomes another opening for conflict. Redirection closes that path. You do not give the other person a new emotional target. You return to the subject, state the standard, or decide that the conversation needs to pause. As Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. The situation may remain uncomfortable, but discomfort is not the same thing as failure. This does not mean becoming cold or dismissive. Tone matters. If you redirect with contempt, the redirection becomes another form of attack. The goal is not to make the other person feel small. It is to prevent the conversation from becoming smaller. You can say that you are willing to discuss the disagreement, but not personal insults. You can acknowledge that emotions are high and suggest returning to the issue when everyone can speak clearly. Each choice communicates the same principle. The behavior occurred, but it does not get to determine the entire interaction. Sometimes this creates an unexpected shift. When someone expects resistance, they prepare for resistance. They expect you to defend yourself, attack them back, or become visibly upset. When none of those things happen, their momentum can weaken. They may hear how harsh they sounded. They may realize that nobody else is joining the conflict. They may even correct themselves. None of these outcomes should be your goal, because then you would still be trying to control their reaction. The real goal is simpler. Keep your own behavior within your control. If they calm down, good. If they do not, you still know what belongs to you. That becomes especially important when other people are watching. In a group, your response teaches more than the person who insulted you. It shows everyone what behavior you will participate in and what you will redirect. Someone who explodes at every disrespect teaches volatility. Someone who ignores every problem teaches that standards do not matter. You can address what is unacceptable while keeping the larger purpose intact. Bring the discussion back to the specific behavior instead of attacking the person's character. You do not need to list everything they have ever done wrong. With practice, this becomes less like a technique and more like a change in how you see conflict. You stop assuming that every emotional challenge deserves an emotional answer. You become more interested in solving the problem than proving that you were offended. You are no longer simply reacting to the emotional temperature of the room. You are helping determine where the room goes next. The person who brings disorder into a conversation does not have to define it. You can acknowledge the disrespect, refuse the personal attack, return to the real issue, and continue with your standards intact. Either way, you gain clarity. You remained present enough to choose your direction, and redirection becomes a form of self-command. There are moments when staying in a conversation begins to cost more than the conversation can possibly give back. You explain yourself once, then again. You clarify what you meant. You try to keep your voice calm while the other person keeps pushing, interrupting, insulting, or twisting what you say. At first, you think the solution is better communication. Then you notice something uncomfortable. The problem is no longer that they do not understand you. The problem is that they have understood the boundary and simply do not care about respecting it. That changes what the situation requires. You cannot reason someone into respecting a limit they have already decided to test. This is where leaving becomes a form of self-command. Walking away is often misunderstood because people associate it with losing, avoiding conflict, or being unable to defend yourself. But there is a difference between escaping discomfort and deliberately removing yourself from a situation that is becoming destructive. If the only reason you stay is to prove that you can endure the person's behavior, endurance has stopped being useful. You are no longer protecting a principle. You are simply remaining available for another round of the same conflict. Sometimes the most rational response is to stop giving the situation access to your attention. This is one reason Stoic discipline places such importance on judgment. The first impression is not always the final truth. Something happens, the mind immediately labels it, and then emotion gathers around that label. If someone speaks harshly, you may decide they are deliberately trying to humiliate you. If someone ignores you, you may decide they no longer respect you. If someone criticizes your work, you may experience criticism as an attack on your character. Those interpretations may be accurate or mistaken. Waiting does not mean doubting yourself. It means separating the event from the meaning your emotions attach to it. A delayed response can also change the other person's state. When two people are angry, each reaction becomes fuel for the next one. One person raises their voice, the other raises theirs, and within minutes, the original issue is buried under accumulated emotion. Time breaks that rhythm. The other person has time to think without immediately defending themselves. They may recognize the problem, apologize, or remain defensive. You cannot guarantee the outcome, and that matters because your peace cannot depend on receiving the reaction you hoped for. This is where delayed response must be separated from silent punishment. Waiting is not a psychological trick designed to make someone anxious. It is not about disappearing so that they chase you. It is not about withholding attention until the other person becomes desperate for your approval. Those behaviors may look controlled, but they are still driven by the desire to control someone else's emotions. True delay is much simpler. You are giving yourself time because you want your next action to reflect your judgment rather than your anger. How they use that time belongs to them. You can even prepare for this before conflict happens. Decide in advance what you want to do when anger rises. Maybe you will take a walk, wait until morning before sending a serious message, or tell someone you want to continue when you can both speak calmly, and the conversation can finally become productive again. A plan matters because intense emotion makes improvisation difficult and pushes the mind toward familiar habits. When the mind is flooded, it reaches for whatever response has been practiced most often. If your familiar habit is immediate retaliation, you need another habit ready to take its place. The deeper benefit is that delay teaches you to trust yourself. You begin learning that you do not have to express every thought simply because it appeared in your mind. You do not have to answer every accusation immediately. You do not have to prove your innocence before you have fully understood what happened. You can let a thought sit there without turning it into an action. That is a quiet form of freedom. Emotions can speak without becoming the final authority. When you eventually return to the conversation, you may still be firm. You may say what was unacceptable, explain the boundary, or decide that the relationship needs to change. Delay does not necessarily make the response softer. It makes it more deliberate. As Seneca observed, anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. A calm response can be more direct than an angry one because it does not waste energy on everything that does not matter. You can address the exact behavior, explain its consequence, and make your decision clear. And sometimes the most important result is that you discover you no longer need to respond in the way you originally imagined. The anger may have revealed something important, but time may show you that the situation does not deserve continued attention. That is not weakness, it is perspective. You have allowed the feeling to inform you without allowing it to govern you. The offense may remain wrong and the boundary necessary. But now the response belongs to you. That is the purpose of waiting. Not to manipulate or appear powerful, but to make sure that when you finally speak or act, you can respect the decision long after the anger has passed. There is a subtle trap in wanting to be respected. You can begin with a healthy desire to be treated well, then slowly become dependent on other people's agreement with your value. Someone speaks down to you, and suddenly you feel compelled to prove that you deserve better. You explain your intentions, you list what you have done, you defend your character, you keep talking because some part of you believes that if you can just make them understand your worth, the discomfort will disappear. But this gives their judgment far more authority than it deserves. A person can misunderstand you, underestimate you, or judge you unfairly, and none of those things automatically changes who you are. That distinction is easy to miss when emotions are involved. Being respected and being recognized as worthy are not exactly the same thing. Respect, in a practical sense, can be shaped through boundaries and consequences. Recognition depends on another person's mind, and their mind is outside your control. You can tell someone that their behavior is unacceptable. You can stop participating in a conversation that becomes insulting. You can reduce your access, your attention, or your trust when someone repeatedly crosses a line. But you cannot force them to suddenly develop better judgment. Trying to control that part is exhausting because it requires you to keep returning to the same person for the approval you were trying to become independent from. This is where the Stoic idea of control becomes more than a philosophical principle. Your character does not become stronger because another person finally admits that you were right. It becomes stronger when your actions remain aligned with your standards even when nobody applauds them. Your choices belong to you. Your conduct belongs to you. Your boundaries belong to you. Another person's opinion does not. That does not mean their opinion is irrelevant in every practical situation. Feedback can contain useful information, and criticism can reveal something you need to improve. The point is simply that you do not have to turn another person's judgment into a verdict on your identity. Think about how differently you behave when you are trying to prove yourself compared with when you are simply enforcing a standard. When you are proving yourself, your attention keeps moving toward the other person. Did they understand? Did they feel guilty? Do they finally see that I am not weak? Did they realize they went too far? Your emotional state rises and falls with their reaction. But when you are enforcing a standard, the focus stays with your own decision. This behavior is unacceptable to me, so I will not continue the conversation. That relationship has become unhealthy, so I will create distance. That comment crossed a line, so I will address it calmly. You do not need the other person to agree before your decision becomes real. That is why consistency carries more influence than intensity. A dramatic confrontation can make someone cautious for an afternoon, but it does not necessarily teach them what your standards are. If one day you tolerate an insult, the next day you explode over something smaller, and the day after that you ignore something serious because you are tired, people cannot clearly understand where your boundaries exist. Your reactions become connected to your mood instead of your principles. Consistency changes that. When your response remains calm, clear, and proportionate, people begin to understand what they can expect from you. They learn that certain behavior will receive a boundary rather than an emotional performance. Consistency also changes you internally. Each time you respond according to a principle instead of a passing emotion, you reinforce an identity. You become someone who does not need to shout to be firm, someone who can say no without giving a speech, someone who can leave without creating a scene, someone who can accept an apology without forgetting what happened, and who can withhold trust without turning the decision into revenge. These actions may look small from the outside, but psychologically they create stability. You stop negotiating with yourself every time another person tests you. There is an important difference between being difficult to mistreat and being difficult to live with. A person can become so focused on protecting their dignity that every disagreement feels like disrespect. That is not strength, it is hypervigilance. Not every correction is an insult. Not every disagreement is an attempt to diminish you. Not every awkward comment deserves a boundary. Discernment matters because a standard that treats everything as a threat eventually becomes impossible to maintain. Real self-command includes the ability to let minor things pass without feeling that you have betrayed yourself. You choose what deserves your energy instead of demanding that every uncomfortable moment receive a response. The same principle applies when someone genuinely has crossed a serious line. You do not need to become cruel to make your position unmistakable. Calmness does not weaken a boundary. In many situations, it makes the boundary clearer because there is less emotional noise around it. You can speak directly. You can state what you will and will not accept. You can explain the consequence without turning the explanation into a threat. Then you can follow through. The follow-through is what gives the boundary its meaning. Words without action become requests. Consistent action turns a standard into something real. Over time, this changes the way you think about respect itself. You stop treating it as something you have to extract from people. You start seeing it as something your choices either reinforce or undermine. You cannot guarantee that everyone will respect you. Some people will still behave badly. Some will misunderstand your calmness. Some may even interpret your restraint as weakness. Their interpretation is theirs. Your responsibility is to know what you stand for and behave accordingly. As Epictetus taught, it is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows. When your conduct becomes consistent enough, you no longer need to announce your standards constantly. Your behavior communicates them before you explain them. Revenge can hide inside self-control so easily that you may not notice it. You stop yourself from shouting, walk away, wait before responding, and from the outside, look composed. But inside, the conversation keeps happening. You replay the insult while trying to sleep. You imagine the perfect response. You picture them realizing their mistake or understanding how badly they treated you. The body has left the conflict, but the mind is still standing in the same room. Calm behavior alone is not enough. You can control your expression while remaining controlled by resentment. This distinction matters because revenge can disguise itself as justice. You tell yourself that you are making the person understand the consequences. You want them to regret it and feel the discomfort they caused you. Accountability can be necessary, and consequences can be appropriate. But accountability and revenge have different destinations. Accountability asks what needs to change. Revenge asks what the other person should feel. One asks what action is necessary. The other keeps checking whether the other person is suffering enough. Once your peace depends on their suffering, they still have influence over you. This is where emotional transformation becomes more useful than suppression. Suppression says, "I am not angry," while resentment continues underneath. Transformation says, "I am angry, and now I want to understand what this feeling is showing me." Maybe your pride was wounded. Maybe you felt ignored. Maybe the insult touched an insecurity you rarely admit. Maybe you feared that staying silent would make you look weak. The emotion can reveal where you are vulnerable to other people's opinions. That does not make the feeling shameful. It makes it useful. Instead of asking how to make the other person pay, you begin asking what gave their behavior so much power over you. Sometimes the answer is practical. You may have tolerated disrespect because you needed the relationship or stability connected to that person. When something feels necessary, boundaries become harder to enforce. You start negotiating against yourself. You tell yourself it was only one comment. You excuse another incident because the timing was bad. You remain available because leaving feels too expensive. Then resentment becomes enormous, even though it was built from many small compromises over time. The problem was not simply that someone treated you poorly. It was that fear convinced you that you had to accept the treatment to keep something else. Seeing that clearly can be uncomfortable because it returns responsibility to you without blaming you for someone else's behavior. You did not cause their disrespect, but you can examine the conditions that allowed it to remain in your life. Self-reflection is not the same as self-accusation. It is an attempt to recover choice. If fear of rejection made you tolerate too much, you can build the ability to tolerate rejection. If dependence made boundaries difficult, you can work toward greater independence. If insecurity made criticism feel threatening, you can strengthen your judgment until disagreement no longer feels like a verdict on your worth. That does not mean forgiveness is always required. You are not obligated to restore trust because you have released anger. You can forgive internally and still maintain distance. You can wish someone no harm while deciding they no longer belong in the same place in your life. You can accept that they may never understand the damage they caused. Their lack of insight does not prevent you from learning. Sometimes the healthiest conclusion is simply that you now know something you did not know before. You know what behavior you will not normalize and where your boundaries need to become clearer. The deeper shift happens when disrespect becomes information rather than an injury you must constantly defend. It tells you something about the person, the relationship, and yourself. You can study your reaction without condemning yourself for having it. As Carl Jung observed, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Notice which situations make you desperate for approval and which words make you feel compelled to prove yourself. Those patterns show you where your freedom is weakest emotionally. Once you see them, you can work on them deliberately. The goal is not to become someone who never feels hurt. That would be unrealistic. The goal is to feel hurt without turning pain into a permanent source of bitterness. Eventually, the person who disrespected you may never know how much you changed. They may never apologize or realize that you stopped chasing their approval and became more selective about who receives your trust. That is completely fine. Your transformation does not need their participation. The strongest outcome is not watching them regret what they did. It is simply reaching a point where their regret is no longer necessary for you to feel whole. You have taken the lesson, adjusted your boundaries, understood your vulnerability, and continued living. The event remains part of your history, but it no longer directs your behavior. That is when restraint becomes freedom, and the desire to get even finally loses its grip. The next time someone disrespects you, remember that your greatest power is not in making them regret what they did. It is in refusing to let their behavior decide who you become. Stay calm, hold your standard, protect your dignity, and when the moment passes, let your peace belong to you again. If this message gave you something to reflect on, choose one of the videos on the screen and continue the journey.